Today, I would like to spend some time talking about the ego. In psychology, the term ego strength is used in a positive way of a developing child. That ego strength means that they have capacities for good functioning. However, in a spiritual context, ego is seen as the small self as opposed to self with a capital S, the divine self. So ego and the inner child is connected in this way because what the ego does is all about separation and fear. And as you think about how I have described childhood wounds, they created, among other things, fear. In fact, when anyone encounters pain, and when that individual person is very, very young, the pain is often accompanied by fear because one doesn't know when the pain is going to end, whether it's going to get worse, or how the pain will appear again. So the young child is put on edge, fearing that pain is going to continue or will appear again or worsen. So a young being, a baby, when its needs are not seen, when they feel they've been neglected, abandoned, rejected, or betrayed, feels fear. And this is what really gives a birth to the ego, because the ego lives out of fear, wants to keep the individual, humans, in fear, because then it gets its way. It gets its way by keeping the individual on constant guard, not trusting anything, anyone. In fact, the ego tries to triumph, be the authority, which an adult refers to. And yet this ego is based in fear. And therefore, you could see this alliance between ego and thinking, because ego uses thoughts of the past to make you afraid of the future or the present. Because when you are seeing through the lens of what hurt you, you fear that you're going to experience pain, you're in danger. So the past is never resolved and let go, but ego wants you to carry the painful experiences of past to bring fear into the present and into the future. And it uses thinking for this very purpose. Just think about thoughts. Thoughts, the thinking mind is logical, analytical. It takes things apart to understand. It doesn't bring a wholeness, answers that give you peace. Rather, it keeps you thinking that you are different and separate from someone, and you can't trust that someone So there is very distinct barrier between you and the other. The whole point of healing the child parts, as well as coming to a place where you are aligned with spirit, means that you begin to see that you are not separate and different from the other, but you are all, in some ways, angels. God never sent anyone but angels, which brings me to the point of Neil Donald Walsh's little children's parable called The Little Soul and the Sun, where in heaven, in the clouds, little soul is having a conversation with God and gets to the point of saying, I don't know who I am. And God says, who do you want to be? And God and the little soul thinks about it and says, I want to be forgiveness. So God says, you need to go back to earth and learn what it means to forgive. So as little soul is gathering the costumes for his human life, a friendly soul approaches and says, I'm coming with you. And little soul says, why? And she says, well, we've done this before, and it's because I love you. So they began to take the human costumes and dress in them. And she turns to the little soul and says, I want you to promise me one thing. You will never forget who I am right now. I am an angel like you. No matter how much I do the worst things to you, you can't forget who I am. Because if I forget, you'll forget, and we'll both be lost. So the story ends with God saying, remember, I only sent angels. This is a way of describing how in this reality, we each see ourselves as separate. And the world, human life, conspires to allow frictions, conflicts, war, in the worst instance, where there is not connecting energies between people. Compassion, empathy, collaboration, connection, a sense of community, but rather separation and not seeing. In some ways, we all are the same. We all are angels. So, ego wants to keep each one of us separate and with the child wounds of feeling so abandoned and alone, this ego can take. It is its birthplace to make you feel in fear constantly and feeling very separate, no connection to another. And that is how ego plays itself out in terms of competition, having to be the best. And doesn't matter who you step upon. It also uses any capacity to make sure that the individual rises. And that's why people say he's just full of himself. He's so egotistical. That's the triumph of an ego in an adult. So the work of the inner child is to heal the early wounds that made the child feel alone and full of fear, so that fear can be resolved in the adult, And the oneness is resolved in terms of having compassion, in feeling the connectedness between you and me, not separate. Ego wants separation, and love wants oneness, togetherness, connection. So this is how ego can be described as having a role in inner child healing. I'm not sure whether this made any sense. Ask your questions, make your comments. Thank you for listening.